Hey everybody, welcome to So Many Sequels, your book club for movies. I'm Josh.
I'm Garrett.
And I'm David.
Welcome to Disaster Month.
Explosions!
Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes.
Lava.
Yes.
Space aliens.
Floods.
Everything.
Space aliens. Oh, it all. Yeah, we got it all.
We got it.
We have
got
everything.
We may have some of those things. I don't know about all of them. But yeah, we're talking about disaster movies this month on the show. Something about a disaster movie. It awakens a thrill in you. Because the best ones are like, this couldn't happen. But
Yeah.
could it? And we're starting off with Dante's Peak this week, which is Garrett's pick. Let me just read the letterbox description of this movie. Volcanologist Harry Dalton comes. I can't get over volcanologist. I can't. Yes, Dr. Spock, Mr. Spock. I love that part.
Without the ears, yeah.
Volcanologist Harry Dalton, played by Pierce Brosnan, comes to the sleepy town of Dante's Peak to investigate the recent rumblings of the dormant volcano the berg is named for. Before long, his worst fears are realized when a massive eruption hits, and immediately, Harry, the mayor, and the townspeople find themselves fighting for their lives amid a catastrophic nightmare. Before we get into the what's and the whys, David, what was the box office reaction to Dante's Peak?
Well, therein lies quite the interesting tale. So, 1997 is the year we must travel back to, the weekend of February 7th. So this was a early in the year release, put into what might usually be referred to as the dump months of January and February. It brought in $18.4 million in its opening weekend. That was just behind the second weekend of the re-release of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, the special edition, which brought in $24.2 million. At number 3 was The Beautician and the Beast. At number 4, Jerry Maguire in its 9th week brought in $3.5 million. And then Scream in its 8th week brought in $3.5 million in the number 5 spot.
Nice.
It would go on to make $67 million in its U.S. run, which is not a super high number. It's not bad. It made $111 million overseas for a worldwide total of $178 million. Now that sounds fantastic for 1997. However, and I invite you guys to comment on this, it had an estimated budget of $115 million, which was pretty high. We talked about last year True Lies, the first film to ever have a budget over $100 million, and how that became a bit of a trend. Waterworld, infamously, was the first movie to have a $100 million budget to absolutely bomb. And here we are with Dante's Peak, which had a pretty high budget. It made $178 million, so on a lesser budget, that's a pretty good run. However, on the budget it had, it is considered a box office failure when you take into account both the production, marketing, and all that. This is kind of something we've been talking about a lot lately, specifically with companies like Disney creating these like $280 million, $250 million, $300 million movies that can't possibly make their money back.
I would be curious to find out what exactly caused the inflated budget for that time period. I'm assuming it's got to be like, it seemed like
Pierce
a lot
Brosnan's
of
salary.
Yeah, well, sure, that. But I was going to go with there's a lot of practical effects, I think. I think this movie used a lot of miniatures. For the volcano effects, and that could have been costly. I don't know. I don't make movies. I just want to vote for them in the Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
They rented a helicopter.
They're honestly, I said not a non-insignificant number of the budget had to go to renting helicopters because they used a lot of helicopters in this movie.
Yeah,
Like,
they used a
were all over
helicopter
the
to
place.
film the helicopter shot. That's 2 helicopters that you got to rent
Yeah.
right there alone.
Oh my god!
I mean, it starts to wind
And
up as
every
you go.
pilot, every helicopter pilot's always asking for more money. They always want to renegotiate their rates.
You're in the middle of
Especially
a
if
project.
you got them diving into a possibly active volcano. I would want to renegotiate my rates too.
So this movie did have a pretty high practical budget. It also had a pretty high visual effects budget. This was this film was worked on by Digital Domain, which was created by James Cameron for True Lies, and ended up working on a lot of James Cameron stuff. All 3 movies we're doing this month are Digital Domain movies, so that's kind of a weird coincidence that we ran into there. It finished the year as the number 22 movie of 1997. This is a year we've been to a couple of times. The number 1 movie, Titanic. Number 2 movie, Men in Black. So we've actually reviewed both of those movies here for the podcast. Number 3 movie of 1997 was The Lost World, Jurassic Park. Number 4, Liar Liar. And number 5 was Air Force One. The other detail that I wanted to mention about this movie was that it came out a mere 2 months before another volcano movie, simply titled Volcano, starring Tommy Lee Jones. Some credit the mid reviews for each of those movies for being because of the high confusion of 2 volcano movies coming out so close to each other. A lot of interesting stuff about Dante's Peak and that time period of year. The fact that 2 volcano movies came out at the same time. The fact that this had such a hard to overcome overall budget. Anyhow, I will defer to you guys. That's it for the box office stats this week.
So, Dante's Peak. Garrett, why did you pick this, and what were your expectations going in?
I was down to 2, and the other one was Mars Attacks.
Yeah, I saw you put that in there.
Would have been a good one. But I had never seen Dante's Peak before, and I, again, have only seen Pierce Brosnan in non-James Bond related roles, so I thought that, kind of stuck right into my lane. Expectations, truthfully, they were quite low. I had never really heard of this, to be honest with you, and I thought Pierce Brosnan doesn't usually have the best track record of being a good actor in general, for some reason. So I didn't really have high expectations, and I'm happy to say that they were exceeded, because I did. I found this quite fun. I found it very entertaining with the dramatic pieces. I don't think it needed some of the pieces that we had in there, but I thought it was a lot of fun. And that's what I need from a disaster movie. It's just some fun.
Okay, yeah, I agree. That's what I look for in these movies, too. I have some memories of watching it as a kid. I definitely watched this a few times. There were parts that were coming back to me as I watched it. And I feel like it put me into a volcano phase. And I wanted to ask if you guys went through a volcano phase as a kid. A lot of kids, especially kids of our age, went through Titanic phases, went through Egypt phases, like Egyptian tombs and mummies. Volcano phases, I think, happened, and I was one of them.
No,
I don't think
volcanoes,
so.
Not
No
really. I mean, I think
volcanoes
I
for
built
me.
a volcano one time.
I was
for
super
science.
into volcanoes, and maybe this movie helped me, or maybe the volcano phase led me to the movie. I don't know which.
Yeah.
I was hoping that it would reignite some kind of excitement for volcanoes.
Some
within
dormant
me.
excitement that you had for.
I don't know that it did, but those were my expectations. Well, no, that shouldn't have been an awe. I actually loved it.
Oh, okay, good.
I mean, look, as far as I can say, I loved
Sure.
this movie.
Yes.
No,
yes.
I just don't know that it reignited
Your
or
love for
piqued
volcanoes.
my
Yeah.
interest
Hey.
in volcanoes. David, what were your expectations for this? Had you seen it before?
No, my expectations didn't exist. I vaguely knew the title Dante's Peak. I had heard it. I think I confused some of the imagery that I had seen with Volcano, because I think in the movie Volcano, somebody jumps off a car into lava and then just like slowly melts from their feet down or
Oh,
something.
my.
So like I had seen Volcano stuff in like clips somewhere along the way, but other than I expected a volcano. Like that was what I expected. I was like, I didn't know anything else going in.
We open with this little kind of a cold open, I guess it were, where I had to laugh. It's terrible, but I had to laugh. This movie opens with a girl getting walloped by a lava rock, and that's how she dies.
That was crazy.
Marianne, his Harry's first love interest,
Yeah.
his first love, while they're driving away, trying to escape another erupting volcano. A molten lava rock comes through the roof like a meteorite, knocks her out.
That was
What
crazy.
what an opening!
You said
was-
cold
yeah.
open. I had to pause it and be like,
Sizzling open.
did I start in the middle? What
I had that
happened
thought
here?
too. I was like, wait, but the credits.
Yeah, I know. It was so weird, but I was like, maybe it jumped. I don't know. But no, I had never seen that before. Crazy. And she did. It just impaled her. Poor Marianne.
I know.
Just blood gushing from the top of her head.
Yeah.
It was rough.
He
Not
pulls
just
her in
a rock,
close
a
and he has
lava
blood
rock.
on his face, man, afterwards.
Yeah. Pierce was
Marianne.
Yeah, he took that hard.
It's pretty
Set
traumatic.
him off.
It was pretty traumatic. And, but it's one of those things of, you think to yourself, how often can one person be conveniently at 2 large-scale volcanic eruptions?
When you're
If you are-
volcanologist, I bet the
I was
odds
gonna say,
go high.
if you are the smartest British volcanologist at the United States Geological Survey, then you are at the center of every volcano. Except we take a 4-year fast forward and find out that Pierce Brosnan has been pushing up through the pain of losing Marianne. He's been doing push-ups
for
4 years. And now a new active volcano is starting to simmer in the second best, I'm checking my notes, the second best place to live in the United States.
With population
Dante,
under 20,000.
With population under 20,000. Dante's Peak. Did anyone catch the state? I don't know that I
They're in
caught it.
Washington,
Oregon?
I believe. Or maybe Oregon. There's
Both.
Northwest.
Both make sense. Linda Hamilton, fresh from surviving the Terminator, is now the mayor of Dante's Peak with her 2 kids. She's announcing, this whole thing while Harry is here to ruin the fun. What do you guys think of this whole Hallmark-esque little town gathering together to find out that they're the second best place to live to some podunk bullshit place in Montana, probably?
Man, I thought it was. I didn't. The thing that I didn't love about this movie truly was the relationship aspect. I didn't think you needed that with all the stuff
It's
going
so
on.
unnecessary.
So I didn't love that. But I did absolutely love how much pride they had in being the second best place to live. They were so proud, and they would be. And they'd be so mad at number 1, too. So all of that I found truly accurate and just really, I thought it was amazing.
I was dying because during her speech, where she's talking about how great the town is, some guy in the background goes, "Tell him, Mayor." I wrote it down. She's like, "We're the second best place. Tell him, Mayor."
So you open up with the 4 years later push-up scene.
Yeah.
And he's on vacation. It's established. And they call him, and they're like, "Hey, we got a thing. We need you to come in and check it out, blah, blah, blah." And he comes in, and he checks it out, and he says what he thinks. And then everyone goes, "You need a vacation." Bitch, you called him in.
Yeah.
Isn't that infuriating?
Yes. I hated every time they told him to take a vacation. I was like, he was a sad push-up boy.
He took a
and
vacation
you
for 4
brought him in,
years.
asked his opinion. He gave it to you, and then you didn't like it.
Ain't that how it goes, though?
David, what about you? What did you think of the opening? Uh-oh. David's going to be the salt in our wound right here.
I probably am.
Put it
Oh,
in.
no.
Guys, this movie's very by the numbers. I mean, it's Jaws, but with a volcano.
Yes.
And
It's Twister,
and-
but with a volcano.
Yes.
I know, yeah, I know. And when you've seen better, it
Not with volcano,
was
you haven't.
it was
Now with
very
the volcano,
it was,
you haven't.
It was very predictable.
Yes. No, what were... my question is, you said your expectations were
Were none.
non-existent, but you clearly had some.
You clearly expected a basic plot, and that was wrong of you. You clearly expected originality. Wrong.
I don't feel like any disaster movie we're going to watch this month is going to have any kind of different plot than what we just saw.
I know. So
I think
that's what
all
I'm
three
saying
of them
is
are going to be the same.
get ready
Same, but different.
for a similar a similar line of critiquing where. Much like a bad horror movie, this movie struggled to endear me to anybody in this movie that I wanted to really root for or see them succeed. I don't want to be harsh or anything like that, but I will say I really appreciate how nostalgic it really made me feel for the 90s. Like everything was very, podunk and rustic, and the characters are very
Just like I remember it.
just like I remember. Everything was so simple,
Pre-internet.
I had that pre-internet thought where I was like, if they did make this movie today, they would just say, "No, it's not," and that'd be it. And then it would erupt, and they would die, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
and then 5 years later, they would then say that not only did that volcano never erupt, that town never existed, and you're crazy for remembering it. That's what it'd be like today. Anyway.
So I apologize for my cruel words earlier, but
It's allowed.
what I did appreciate early on was the sort of I thought that it had a decent build. You had like this couple that was in a little hot spring and they got boiled alive. That was a good traumatic experience for a couple of 11-year-olds.
Get out of the water, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, what? Like, you start to feel it get hot, you know.
Get out of the water.
Get out.
It's
They
a
didn't
hot
have
spring.
time. They were flash fried. They got put in an air fryer. It was one of those classic things of like you said, Garrett, the one guy who's clearly right and nobody wants to listen to him. You know, like, I think, Josh, you put in here this note here about it being Jaws, like, in terms of the politics of it.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
we're
yeah.
not going to shut this town down.
See,
They're
and
gonna
this is
take
where
jobs.
I started getting into the movie because it has a clear anti-capitalist message about man's greed versus Mother Nature, and how even Harry's boss at the USGS was like, well, one time I upset some tourists, and I don't think we should upset tourists this time. So, like, don't tell them it's going to erupt unless it's going to erupt. And then we spend the whole movie with him going, it is going to erupt.
It's kind of...
But so much of this movie has that peppered in poorly. But it's like, we can't freak everyone out because this is a happy town. We can't scare away tourists because that's where they make the money. The helicopter man wants more money, so he's just going to leave you if he doesn't get paid more. There's money problems all over this movie.
See, and I thought that there were aspects of reality within that. You know, there are aspects of, you know, the cranky grandma that's like, well, they said that mountain was going to blow up 30 years ago, and it never has, and all that. And you have, like, these characters that are just like, nah, I ain't leaving even if it does erupt. We had that conversation.
You have that now, though.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have that with flood. You know, when there's flooding, when there's tornadoes, like there are just people who are just like, I'm not leaving. I haven't gotten killed yet, so what is the chance I'm going to get killed tomorrow? We joked one time when we were watching Godzilla that like there'd be some redneck on his porch going, if I see Godzilla coming down my street, then fine, I'll move. But until then, I'm staying right here. And so there was a lot of those classic, mentalities and setups, and it does feel very realistic that you would have a town's leadership be resistant to evacuating. That said, I think that honestly, that's like, Josh, you started writing notes about that. That's kind of where more of the interest of the meat is, as opposed to, you know, watching a robot crawl down the side of a mountain. There's something in the way there that they could have, I think, really worked with.
So around this point, we're hitting our kind of second act tier here, where finally somebody starts to listen, and the mayor's like, okay, I need you to ask all 20,000 people in this town to come to the high school auditorium immediately. And then they do.
I know. That would never happen today. And how did they get that message? I mean, word of mouth. That's the only reason people did it.
Word of mouth.
This is just another
the
dumb
sheriff
thing.
drove around yelling it.
This is another dumb thing that we understand a little bit more because of our news backgrounds and stuff. But I was like, this whole meeting and press conference was called way too quickly, way too efficiently. Everybody's too nice. You have, what do you mean you have like information printed out already? No, you don't.
Yeah, no.
You don't have any of that. But of course, it was held too late, and the volcano erupts during the meeting, causing a mass stampede where Harry has to save an old man from being trampled like Mufasa. But this is, I wanted to say, I hit the little thing on my remote at this point. There's still like half the movie left to go
I know.
when the volcano erupts.
I will say the pacing of the movie could have been better because there was a lot, and I appreciated this. This is not a knock for me. They really went into a lot of the science, and they gave you a lot of like, we're really trying to take this as a serious situation as opposed to another type of movie where it could just be over the top. You know, a little over the top is good, but I think even most of this was pretty realistic as far as like what a volcanic eruption would be. I don't know if that's true, but it's mostly ash. That's what really gets the people.
I only know
the
about
ash.
from Pompeii documentaries. Yeah.
Right. And then the lava comes in. But I think most people think it's lava first, but no, it's all of the ash and all of the less exciting, if you will, things. But those are the most dangerous aspects of it. And I think that is what they were trying to get the point across. Is like, it's not just lava. It is a bigger kind of a thing.
Yeah, they kind of played it with that a little bit when the kids kind of make their own escape, and we need to talk about the kids. When they go to try to rescue Grandma Ruth from the mountaintop, they find out they can hardly see from the ash falling, and I immediately was like, oh god, they're going to drive off the mountain. I got scared.
Yeah, it was the middle point. I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't my favorite part.
It was rough because it's
yeah.
that's where the pacing's the worst. It's because
there's a lot of the relationship stuff is going on in there, and they're just those are the pieces that I wish they would have cut for more involvement or action pieces.
Yeah, this movie for a while suffers from not enough volcano, and then all of a sudden becomes maybe too much volcano. It is like a halfway point, and it erupts so suddenly. And I guess to an extent, he's been warning them for a week, but it does feel like the worst possible time for it to erupt is when you have 1,000 people all gathered into one spot. And so they just go into mass hysteria. And then, of course, the kids, they've gone back up to save grandma. And that just, creates more and more tension out of the whole thing. I did a little bit of research on this in terms of the accuracy of this particular depiction of a volcano. And back then, in 1997, the USGS, because they knew they had 2 volcano-based movies coming out in one year, they created a fact-checking page.
Nice.
For both movies.
Wow.
And they said that generally, in many but not all respects, Dante's Peak's depiction of eruptive hazards hits close to the mark. So, somewhat accurate. I'm sure there's probably elements in there that are greatly exaggerated.
Hollywoodized. Yeah.
I don't know if you could get if the lake's acidity would reach the levels that it hit as quickly as it did, but it's at least close, as I said, to the mark. They did say, interestingly, in 2019 there was a editorial written by two geologists. It's called "Dante's Peak Has Hero and Bad Guy Mixed Up." They really come to the defense of the guy who is the leader of, I guess, his boss, Harry Donald's boss.
They come to the defense of the guy who says, "For what it's worth, I was wrong, you were right."
They really
He literally says that.
Well, look, and I guess so to the point they're making here is false alarms on volcanoes can be wildly destructive to a town, and really and to the credit of the movie, the volcano does erupt, but in large percentage of the time, volcanoes don't erupt or don't erupt to the level that Dante's Peak erupts. So Dante's eruption is massive.
I feel like that guy's been burned before. That's what that is.
That probably has.
He was like, look, I know that this movie was about a real volcano that erupted, but if it weren't, that guy would have been right. Well, yeah.
And I
Why
think
are you saying that?
But also, I think time has helped a lot with that. The technology is just better today in terms of detecting, the actual likelihood of a volcanic eruption to this degree. But let's talk about the chase down the mountain and them trying to escape.
Right. So we got the kids who are the mayor's 2 kids. She is a single mom in it. She's got a smart-ass, precocious little girl. And he's a little bit of a bad boy. He's breaking the rules when we find him. Typical children. They've run off to try to save Grandma Ruth, who has decided to stay on the mountain because the experts are wrong. So they drive off, and then we start this whole chase sequence where Harry and Rachel are trying to find them. They do. We get to what I think. This is the scene that was sucked me back to my childhood because it's horrifying. When Grandma jumps out of the boat.
Oh, yeah. No.
And pushes that boat through the acid water. I was like, not Grandma. It took me back to being a kid, being like, no, Grandma, why is not the strong man doing this?
I said that too. I was stunned that she jumped out there. Good for Grandma. I mean, she's saving her grandkids and her daughter-in-law.
And they're there because of her insistence.
Right. Yeah.
I probably felt some guilt there.
As she said moments before walking out the door, this mountain never hurt us. And then she walks outside, and there's literally lava pouring all around her home and through the door. In fact, the wall collapses with a wall of lava. Grandma was very stubborn, and I honestly I saw this somewhere. This sequence where she jumps out of the boat and pulls them to safety. I don't know where or how I saw this, but I saw this sequence at some point in time. So it was the only thing where as it was happening, I was like, oh, I know this.
I did most of the third act as far as a lot of the intensity that was built. This is where you get to see a lot of the effects come into play. And, again, there's a level of practical effects that are really, really good. And there's a level of digital effects that are noticeably digital effects from the 90s. And that's okay. it's got a good balance. Honestly, I thought they did a pretty good job with the technology that they had, trying to make lava look real and melt away a home and things like that.
Decent.
So, yeah, I thought they did a really good job with that.
Yeah, and I think you got a visual effects team, a digital team that was able to rely pretty heavily on reference with Mount St. Helens, which was, I think, at the time the most recent massive eruption that happened, at least in the United States. That was back in 1982, I believe, or sometime like that. And so they actually had a pretty recent thing that they could study and look at and be like, okay, let's get a really good depiction of what this volcano is going to look like. The pyroclastic, I think that's the right word, cloud that like bursts out and like knocks down all the houses and all the trees, and they're racing in the car to get to the mine shaft before it hits them. That was honestly one of my favorite parts of the movie, because it was really tense, and you think to yourself like, well, it's just a wall of smoke. Oh no, there's a sound wave coming that's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. So
I think the pacing here though is also a struggle bus, because again, it doesn't seem to flow throughout the movie well. We talked about the second act, it kind of dips, there's not a whole lot going on, there's investigations, there's relationship building, there's all of this other stuff that kind of takes away from what that movie probably could and should have been. The end goes into all of that and continues. It's like it starts at a 10 as soon as it happens, and then it just gets crazier from there. And there's no like reprieve from it. And there probably isn't in a real life volcano explosion too. But that's not how this works. So I think that they just went really, David, I think you said not enough volcano and then too much volcano. I think that had they just kind of weaved this piece over here a little bit to space it, it would have helped a lot, because I did find myself having to be like, okay, move on with this. And then at the end, I was like, okay, hold on, what the hell? I'm going way too fast.
It just kind of ends.
Yeah,
They're freed,
the way
they're
that it all
rescued from the mine that they get trapped in, and
it just seems like such a, I don't know, it seems like an anticlimactic finish, is that they just got stuck and turned on an alarm and then they came and found them. It feels like there could have, and maybe the movie could have benefited from like 1 year later and you see kind of like how things have recovered or how things have changed or something like that. But it just kind of ends, just sort of like they found them, they got in a helicopter and they flew away. And that's kind of, I don't know, it's not quite as climactic.
And some say
of a
they're
finish.
still flying to this day.
And they went fishing.
That's why the budget was so high. That helicopter never came down.
It's an extremely stressful time in the film, I will say, is Pierce Brosnan getting trapped in the car, like in the truck, as he's trying to climb in there and get that signal. It's like the rocks are collapsing on top of him. He's just getting like crushed into the car. I was like, no, and his like arms snapped and stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is like the Jumanji elephant sequence, but worse.
Yeah.
I thought Pierce did a really good job. He acted the heck out of this movie. He was charming as usual, and he was, funny. They let him be. I don't know how funny he is in the James Bond movies, but I mean, again, you mentioned the whole Mr. Spock volcanologist thing. He leans into that. He's charming. He's funny. And he was really good.
He was charming. Linda Hamilton, I thought, was great.
I thought they had good chemistry.
They did.
Not necessarily as romantic partners. I wish they would have been like more, badass trying to save the town. Like, we need to come together because we're the only two who believe that this is happening, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Mayor and Rockman saving the town together would have been better than a forced romantic thing. I agree, because she doesn't have the same level of gravitas badassness that she does in the Terminator movies, but she's not exactly a full-on damsel in distress in this either.
No.
And so she doesn't really need him in the typical way that they might use a male action star, but
especially
she
in
holds
the
her own.
90s.
Yeah.
To dissent a little bit, I felt like they didn't have very much chemistry at all.
Well, fine.
It just felt like like you put them together, it's like, well, this is clearly the lead actress and this is clearly the lead man, therefore they must go together.
Yes.
Nothing about it to me felt like he was just like the perfect guy for her, she's the perfect woman for him. They just have such incredible infatuation. It was basically just, I have to hang out with you for the next 2 days. And she was like, okay, well, then I guess we'll get married. Like, that's basically the vibe of the relationship as it was. She's like, I'll just bring you guys coffee and that will hit it off because I know you like regular coffee. I think this movie could have used some cooler stars.
Ooh.
Oh, cooler.
I
stars
again
for
said
90s.
I didn't like
Okay.
the relationship aspect. I wish they would have changed
Nobody
the
liked
dynamic
that,
and let
yeah.
them save that. But yeah, both of them are great. You're crazy.
Well, let's get
Pierce
to.
Brosnan didn't even try an American accent.
Well, he wasn't.
He
didn't-
shouldn't.
He
He's
wasn't
British.
asked, I assume.
People
Anyway.
wouldn't have liked that.
I have an idea. I'll just be British.
Nobody believes a volcanologist with an American accent. They just don't.
Especially looking like that.
They believed this boss. He had an American accent.
That's
He
just
didn't look like
because
Pierce Brosnan.
They only believed him because he said what they wanted to hear.
You're too handsome to be a volcanologist.
All right, let's do our final review and rating of this movie. Garrett, this is your film. What is your final review and rating?
This one is an interesting one because I really enjoyed it as a concept, but the pacing was a struggle bus sometimes. And it's not one that I'm like, if we're thinking disaster movies, I might revisit it, but it's not, I don't know. So I'm going to give it like a 3.2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
okay.
that's not a score.
Well, I'll take it. 3.2. I'm going to say I had a blast with it. It reminded me of Twister, like I said earlier, so it felt like familiar territory. You got the person who's just kind of riding along with the expert during a natural disaster. I was like, okay, Twister. But, like I said, it was fun. I don't know how much of the science is believable. I know we discussed some of that. Mm-hmm. I'll take their word for it.
We're not scientists or volcanologists. Don't take our opinions for that.
It might
Right.
be more accurate than Twister.
But I don't need it. I don't need it anyway. So I give it. I'm gonna stick with the even 3 stars for me.
All right. Dante's Peak, more like Dante's Mid.
Oh, boo!
That was
No,
lazy.
I'm just.
You can do
I
better than
mostly
that.
just wanted to make that joke for my Gen Z fans. Honestly, Dante's Peak kind of dull for the most part. Perhaps that's more of a burden of just like the tropes of this type of movie, kind of parodying and mocked for a long time. I feel like there's an episode of Community that probably mirrors this exact plot perfectly. The main characters to me were a little plain. The side characters, most of them felt kind of unfinished. So I was bored for most of the movie. I did like once the volcano started kicking off. I thought that really helped. It was better as a action race against time than it was a romantic build for these characters. So impressive visual and physical effects. I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5.
Okay. 2.5, 3, and 3.2 from us on the show. That sends us into the Letterboxd game. We're going to take a guess at what we think the Letterboxd community has rated this film. I'm going to get us started with some of the most popular reviews on the website. You can follow all of us on Letterboxd if you haven't yet. Go do that. Let's see what we got here. 2.5 stars. He's not even supposed to be here today. It's mentioned.
That's a click reference.
3 stars. The scenes of the pyroclastic cloud destroying the miniature town is pure 90s nightmare fuel. 3 stars. Those were the best tires ever made. 3 stars.
Yes,
My
they
only
exploded on impact.
My only concern was if the dog would make it through the eruption alive or not. And then finally, 2 stars. Grandma Ruth would definitely refuse to wear a mask in 2020.
Yes.
The air never hurt me before.
Garrett, take a stab at this. I'm going to just pick you first.
Yeah, Garrett, you're in
Yeah,
last.
I got like one
so.
point. I ain't doing
Oh,
good
I didn't
this year
even
so
realize.
far. Yeah, I know where I'm at. Let's see. I don't think this one's going to be super loved or anything. I think 3.3 is going to be generous, so I'm gonna do that.
Okay, 3.3.
3.3. Josh?
I'm going to guess 3. I'm going to stick with my guess and pick 3.0.
I'm going to shoot kind of lowish, and I'll say 2.7.
We got 2.7, we got 3.0, and we got 3.2. Is that what you said?
3.3.
No, that was your
3.3.
rating. 3.3 was your guess. Okay, we do not have a direct hit this week, but we do have a winner who was off by just 0.1, and is me. This movie is sitting at a 2.9, so my 3.0 guess made it
Nice.
David was very close with the undercutting.
Yeah.
You were right to undercut, just not that much. 2.9.
2.9. Well, darn. I was gonna get. My first thought was 2.8, but I didn't want to be that close to. I didn't want to potentially split a point with you.
Well, see, that could have been fun. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, that puts me and Josh tied again at 6 all.
Ooh,
Garrett,
I have a long way to go.
Garrett, you haven't had a win since Paddington won.
I know.
Most of us haven't.
Unfortunately, I'm looking at Paddington's reviews. Paddington has not reviewed Dante's Peak. So
Oh yeah, Garrett, we found out last week that Paddington did review Matilda, so I don't know if you've gotten to that, but we read Paddington's review of Matilda.
Yeah, I haven't listened to that episode yet, but you can go listen to it on anywhere podcasts are downloaded.
Exactly.
And YouTube videos are watched, which is YouTube.
That is where they're watched. That's going to do it for us this week. We've got more disaster movies planned for you guys this month. So, like you said, go to somanysequels.com. You can follow us wherever you get podcasts. Videos are on Spotify and YouTube. And you can catch us on social media on Instagram at SoManySequelsPod. That's it. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.